Corn Pop was a bad dude. Corn Pop was a bad dude.
Joey, baby.
Lieutenant Dan, ice cream. Lieutenant Dan, ice cream.
Corn Pop was a bad dude.
I love my people.
Okay, buddy. I was just trying to cheer us up, so go ahead. Put on some old sad bastard music, see if I care.
Corn Pop was a bad dude. And he ran a bunch of bad boys.
Lieutenant Dan, ice cream. I love my people.
Democrats are massive losers. That is the theme of today's show, as the late breaking news of the day includes some pretty massive concessions to the corporate wing of the party, to corporate donors. I can't wait to give you the details on that story and more. And also, just brag about the fact that Cenk and I were both absolutely correct in our analysis regarding the billionaire tax that was being proposed by Democrats in Congress. So we'll get to that early on in the first hour. In the second hour, John Iadarola will be joining me to discuss a litany of stories, including Joe Rogan questioning the necessity of men to have paid family leave. This is an ongoing discussion among right-wingers who seem to think fathers spending a little bit of time at home with their newborns is somehow a bad thing. Okay, so we'll get to that later. Also, Fox News would like you to believe that if you are struggling financially, if you're experiencing the same economic anxiety that half of Americans are experiencing when they can't even afford a $400 emergency, you should stop crying about it, because you're actually a lot richer than you think. So we're gonna debunk that nonsense and more. And yes, hello, I'm Anna Kasparian, you're watching The Young Turks. Thank you for tuning in. I'm looking forward to the show today, and I'm looking forward to reading your comments and your super chats. So as always, like and share the stream if you'd like to support us. It's an easy way to do it. And also send us your comments if you happen to be a member of ours, or send in your super chats. We'll read them during our social breaks. But without further ado, why don't we get to the latest on the budget reconciliation bill. Democrats have officially dropped paid family and medical leave from the budget reconciliation bill. Remember, the initial proposal in Joe Biden's Build Back Better agenda was 12 weeks of paid family leave. That was later whittled down to a measly 4 weeks. And we can't even get 4 weeks because our precious corporate Senator Joe Manchin, is not willing to vote in favor of a reconciliation bill that includes even 4 weeks of paid family leave. The United States happens to be the only developed wealthy country that refuses to provide paid family leave for its constituents, for its citizens. And it gives you a sense of just how much our lawmakers are beholden to corporate interests as opposed to the best interests of their own constituents. Now, there's also some other news to share with you today, because there's a reason why that happened. Just one day after we told you that Democrats would not, under any circumstance, pass a tax on billionaires on their unrealized gains, turns out that that tax proposal in the budget reconciliation bill has been dropped. Now, prior to this news, which broke later in the day, there was some waffling from Senator Joe Manchin, who seemed to think that, we're being a little mean here. We're being a little unfair to these poor billionaires. In fact, Axios had reported earlier, scoop, Manchin waffles on billionaire tax. And when Manu Raju of CNN caught up with him, here's what Manchin had to say.
So are you supportive of the billionaires tax? Are you supporting the billionaires tax?
I'm supporting basically that we do, everyone should pay their fair share. And I've just tried to think of it. I don't like it. I don't like the connotation that we're targeting different people. There's people that basically, they've contributed to society, they've created a lot of jobs and invested a lot of money and give a lot to philanthropic pursuits. But it's time that we all pull together and row together.
You heard it. I mean, he's out of his own mouth. He thinks it's unfair. I don't like it. I don't like targeting billionaires who don't pay their taxes. They decide to avoid selling any of their stocks. Remember, this was a proposal to tax unrealized gains of billionaires in the stock market. It would only impact individuals who are literally billionaires, okay? So their assets are over $1 billion. The way that they skirt taxes is they never sell their stocks, okay? Instead, what they do is they use the amount of money they have invested in the stock market as collateral to be approved for various loans, and they live off those loans. That is a way to avoid paying taxes. Now, the proposal was meant to specifically target billionaires who engage in that practice to ensure that they're contributing something to the society that allowed them to become so tremendously wealthy. But you heard it here. You heard it right out of Senator Manchin's mouth. He's not gonna have it. He doesn't like it. It's so unfair. I mean, it's not unfair to all the American workers who have dealt with stagnant wages since the 1970s. He's not worried about how unfair he might be to everyone living in this country and this planet because of the fossil fuel industry polluting it to the point where climate change is not just some far away, distant threat. It is a threat today. People are suffering the consequences of it today. But hey, Joe Manchin doesn't want to pay more in taxes himself. Let's keep it real. Joe Manchin doesn't want to target those poor billionaires. And he certainly doesn't want to touch the fossil fuel industry, especially the coal industry, which he himself profits off of handsomely. So let me give you some more details. So it's really interesting that Manchin is now saying that he's against the billionaire tax. It's been cut out of the bill, right? It was proposed just yesterday, now it's cut out of the bill. Now this is different from the 15% minimum corporate tax. So for corporations who report to their shareholders profits of $1 billion or more, they are supposed to pay, if this passes, if this provision passes, a minimum 15% tax on that money. Okay, and this is essentially a way to mitigate the fact that the effective corporate tax rate is so low in this country thanks to corporate tax loopholes that oftentimes some of the most successful, some of the most lucrative corporations and companies pay nothing in taxes. They get to take advantage of those loopholes and deductions, they pay nothing. Now that minimum 15% corporate tax, as it stands today, it seems like both Manchin and Sinema will vote in favor of it. But we're talking about something completely different here. We're talking about the tax dodgers who have all their assets parked in the stock market. They intentionally avoid selling those stocks so they don't have to pay taxes on it. And then they live off loans that they get qualified for thanks to the assets they hold in the stock market. Okay, again, Manchin is against it. Now it is fascinating though, because when Manchin is confronted by protesters, when Manchin is confronted by his own constituents, he seems to have a little bit of a different message. Let's watch.
Tax the rich.
Well, I agree with that.
Oh yeah, I agree with that. Manchin agrees with that as he sits aboard his yacht, speaking down at the protesters and West Virginia constituents who are demanding that he actually represent their best interests. I mean, he'll pay them lip service. He'll tell them that he believes that billionaires should pay their fair share. Until push comes to shove and he has an opportunity to vote in favor of that provision in the budget reconciliation bill, then all of a sudden, no, I mean, it's unfair. It's so unfair to the poor billionaires. Those poor billionaires. You know, the ones who hoard the wealth, the ones who Americans have been told time and time again provide jobs. They're the ones who are gonna provide higher wages, except they don't do that, as stagnant wages since the 1970s will show you. Manchin's potential opposition, now complete opposition, let's just be clear, to the billionaire tax proposal would blow a $200 billion to $250 billion hole in the Democrats' plan for new revenues. That means that major provisions are gonna be cut. And to be sure, some major provisions have been cut. The one thing that's kind of on the precipice of getting cut, it hasn't happened yet, but my prediction is it will happen, is the expansion to Medicare, something that Senator Bernie Sanders, the head of the Budget Committee in the Senate, says he is unwilling to do away with. We'll see. But Manchin has already expressed some opposition to it. Let's watch.
Senator Sanders has said that Medicare expansion is not going to come out of this bill. Do you still disagree with that?
Okay. Let me just say about the expansions, and we're negotiating and talking about that. I am truly, absolutely concerned about the deficit of our country at almost $29 trillion. I'm concerned about the insolvency of the trust funds. In good conscience, I have a hard time increasing basically benefits, which all of us can agree that, oh, I'd love to have this, love to have that, when you can't even take care of what you have.
He's worried, guys. He's worried about the financial health of this country. He's concerned about the debt. He's concerned about how much money we're spending. I mean, an easy way to reverse some of the damage that's been done over the last several decades would be to ensure that we have wealthy people pay their fair share, that we have corporations pay their fair share. It's interesting because he seemed to be against the Trump era tax cuts for the rich. The tax cuts that cost this country $2 trillion in revenue over 10 years. But he didn't want to reverse it. In fact, he served as a massive obstacle along with Senator Kyrsten Sinema in the passage of that tax increase, of the reversal, just the reversal of the Trump era tax cuts. He was against that. He didn't think that his own view on wealth tax and corporate taxes and billionaire taxes. He didn't see any of that as irresponsible. But when it comes to programs that materially improve your life, when it comes to programs that provide vision, dental, and hearing care to our elderly citizens, that's irresponsible. Can't have it. Can't have it. Because he understands firsthand just how sweet it is to own a yacht. And billionaires might have a yacht or two, but what if they want their third? He gets it. Manchin gets it. It's just that he doesn't understand the plight of Americans living in poverty, including Americans in his own state of West Virginia, which of course is struggling with poverty. But why would he be concerned about that? He's just worried about the poor billionaires. To give you more, Manchin all but killed a proposal to require banks to share more information about customers' accounts with the IRS to help the agency find tax cheats, depriving negotiators of an estimated $200 billion in additional revenues. Tax cheats? Apparently not irresponsible, according to Joe Manchin. Providing dental and vision care to elderly people covered by Medicare? Irresponsible. Super irresponsible. That's who Joe Manchin is. Now, this isn't a discussion about whether Joe Manchin is a good guy or a bad guy. You can make your decision or your judgment on that if you'd like. But what we need to focus on is the systemic issue that's played out time and time again, whether we're talking about the Affordable Care Act or any other issue where you have Democrats dangling policy right in front of us, pretending like they're gonna be warriors for us, and then they immediately fold. They immediately turn around and do right by their corporate donors. Why does that happen? Yes, we have that system of legalized bribery, but we also have lawmakers who are personally invested in the very industries, in the very corporations that don't want to pay higher taxes because they want to increase their profits. If these corporations maximize their profits, what do they get to do with those profits? Corporate stock buybacks, artificially inflate share prices. They also get to pay dividends to their shareholders. And so when you have members of Congress invested in individual stocks, you really think they're gonna bite the hand that feeds? Whether they're Democrats or Republicans, it doesn't matter. If they're personally invested in individual stocks, if they are personally invested in private business ventures, as Joe Manchin is regarding the coal industry, you think they're gonna look out for you? Or are they gonna look out for their bottom line? The way the system is set up with the incentives and disincentives will help you predict what the outcome of any legislation will be. There's a reason why wages in the United States have remained stagnant for decades, since the 1970s. There's a reason why wealth inequality continues to grow in this country regardless of who's sitting in the White House. It happened under Obama, it happened under Trump, and it's continuing to happen under Biden. There's a brief relief with some coronavirus stimulus, but make no mistake about it. What Democrats are doing right now in squandering this opportunity to improve Americans' lives is not just awful for Americans, it's awful for them. Because they can go around and try to do PR, like put out their press releases, do their cutesy little speeches about how this is an unprecedented spending bill. But when Americans see that nearly $2 trillion was spent on the reconciliation bill, but it was so means tested and it was so pared back that they don't actually see a real benefit from it in their personal lives, I would venture to say that Democratic constituents are gonna be a little salty about that. Americans aren't stupid. They know what their personal finances look like. They know what precarity is. They experience it in the workplace on a regular basis. So Democrats might think, hey, looking out for myself, all of these short-term gains for myself, that's way better than doing right by the very people who had voted me in this position of power. But come midterms, come 2024, I don't want to hear any crying from a single damn corporate Democrat who turned their backs on the American people, on their constituents after they turned out to get them either reelected or elected into Congress for the first time. It's pathetic, absolutely pathetic. I want to move on to the issue of paid family leave, because that's absolutely infuriating, especially considering where we were at before and where we are now. So, since Senator Joe Manchin has effectively killed the billionaire tax in the budget reconciliation bill, that means that massive provisions that were wildly popular across the political spectrum will also need to be cut. They don't have the revenue to pay for it, right? And one of the main things that's now cut is paid family and medical leave. The initial proposal from Biden's Build Back Better agenda was 12 weeks of paid family leave. Who doesn't want paid family leave? What Democratic voter thinks that paid family leave is an awful provision to pass? Very small percentage. So the constituents want it. I would argue that Americans across the political spectrum want it. I mean, you look at polling and you see that 3/4 of Americans find it to be a favorable provision. But it doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, paid family leave is something that corporations do not want. Paid medical leave, something corporations do not want. And these are corporations that do a lot of political campaigning, a lot of lobbying, I should say, a lot of money being infused into these political campaigns of Democratic lawmakers. And so it's not so surprising that it started off as a 12-week program, then got pared back to 4 weeks, and now it's just completely cut from the bill. So the question is, why? Why? What kind of excuse are we hearing from Senator Joe Manchin? Senator Kyrsten Sinema, another corporatist in the Senate, doesn't feel like she needs to spend even a second explaining to you why she's against it, why she's gone out of her way to defeat the popular provisions in this legislation. But Manchin tries, he tries. So let's hear what his excuse is.
Paid leave, are you still talking to Senator Gillibrand?
I'm talking to everybody, but I've been very clear. To expand social programs when you have trust funds that aren't solvent, they're going insolvent, I can't explain that. It doesn't make sense to me. I want to work with everyone as long as we can start paying for things. That's all. I can't put this burden on my grandchildren. I've got 10 grandchildren, and I just can't do it.
Now in 2017, when Trump succeeded in passing his tax cuts for the rich, the tax cuts that cost this country $2 trillion over the next decade, they didn't have anything in place to ensure that the tax cuts would be paid for, that there would be something to offset the new tax policy. And at the time, Senator Joe Manchin, along with Kyrsten Sinema, were against the Trump era tax cuts. They claimed they wanted to reverse it, but once they had the opportunity to do so, they served as an obstacle to that. So while Joe Manchin would have you believe, or he would really like to have you believe, that he's concerned about balancing the budget, his actions don't indicate that. Because Democrats, who I think have been incredibly weak but have been negotiating on good faith, had all these pay-fors in the budget reconciliation bill, had all these different opportunities to ensure that we get the wealthiest people in this country to pay their fair share, so we can fund robust social safety net programs that improve Americans' lives. Manchin knows that. Manchin knows that there were pay-fors, but he stood in the way of those provisions that would raise the revenue necessary for incredibly important and popular provisions like paid family and medical leave. That's what the reality is. His corporate donors don't like it. They do not want to worry about their workers having a family and needing a little bit of time off. They don't want to have to worry about paying for that time off. The only thing that the corporations have salivated over throughout this entire process is the budget, the bipartisan infrastructure deal, which has all sorts of corporate handouts for them, which gives them an opportunity to privatize public infrastructure. That's why they want it so bad. And then in the budget reconciliation bill, to be fair, universal pre-K remains untouched. But you guys know why that is. Because universal pre-K means mothers will have some place to drop off their kids so they can go back to the mines, go back to work. There's a labor shortage, everyone. We got to get the women back to work. We got to get the parents back to work. All right, fine, universal pre-K. At least there's a benefit to us, the corporations that do not want to pay their fair share in taxes. But other than that, Other than that, what is left in the budget reconciliation bill? So far, the Medicare expansion is under great threat by corporate Democrats. Bernie Sanders says that he insists on keeping the expansion in the final bill. We don't know what the outcome will be, but if I had to bet my money on it, it'll either be completely pared back to something unrecognizable or it won't even exist in the final version of the bill. Paid family leave, gone. 2 years free community college, gone. Funding for elder care, scaled back considerably. I mean, think about the priorities here. Don't raise taxes on the rich. Make sure you cut the programs that actually benefit workers. That's what's happening. That's who Manchin is, that's who Sinema is. That's what congressional lawmakers overall happen to be if they take corporate money and if they're invested in individual stocks. It's all about narcissism and self-interest, and it's because the incentives are set up that way. And honestly, at this point, the only way I see this country moving forward in a positive direction is if we take a look back at what worked in the past. The only time we've accomplished anything positive in this country, anything robust, anything that really fundamentally changed the power dynamic and the power structure in this country was during FDR. FDR had all sorts of flaws. I'm not trying to, put him up on a pedestal as this perfect president. There were definitely issues with African Americans being left out of the economic programs that proved to be so successful for white Americans in this country. But there's a reason why FDR passed the New Deal, passed all these labor policies that came along with it. It's because there was labor power in the country. We're all atomized, we're all divided, we're all in our little caves, fighting with each other on Twitter, going after these ridiculous manufactured culture wars, allowing right-wingers to bait us into stupid discussions about Dr. Seuss and Mr. Potato. Who cares? Who cares? We need to build a broad coalition. We need to talk to our coworkers. We need to organize our workplace. We need to build labor power in this country. End of story. That is the only answer. Okay, sitting back and hoping that lawmakers are gonna do the right thing under this system that incentivizes their greed, not gonna work. It's just not gonna work. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. We have history to look back on to see what worked and what didn't work. I think we have lots of case studies from recent history indicating what didn't work. It's about time that we start organizing and ensure that we actually threaten capital. That's the only way we get what we want. All right, I've got more on this story, believe it or not. So we're gonna take a quick break and we'll come back with more. What's up, everyone? Welcome to our first social break of the day. Just a quick reminder, this is the final week that Brett Ehrlich is off, so there will not be a happy half hour tonight on Twitch, but he'll be back next week, so you can look forward to that. There's also lots of wonderful Twitch programming that you guys can check out, including Reactions with Ravana. That's tomorrow after Indisputable. You can catch up with Reactions with Ravana on Twitch. Just go to twitch.tv/TYT. That's at 4 p.m. Eastern time. Again, at twitch.tv/TYT. Also, Cenk is a glutton for punishment. He is going to engage in this Pocky challenge thing, okay? But he's only gonna do it if we get to a certain number of Twitch subs, okay? So if you're not a sub already, you can subscribe to our Twitch channel by going to twitch.tv/TYT, or you can even subscribe for free with those sweet, sweet Bezos bucks. So definitely look into that if you have a Prime membership. And if we get to 7,000 subs, Cenk will eat the Pocky chip and he will be in great pain. So if you're looking forward to that kind of stuff, definitely consider subscribing. Also, if you get to 6,200 subs on Reddit, Jordan Yule, Adiana Vega, Brett, and Brooke will do the Pocky Chip Challenge. So just something to keep in mind. All right, let's go to our members' comments. We have Doodle Dragon who writes, nailed it, Anna. Great intro to the show and speaking truth. Thank you. I Am Sock says, why haven't the ghosts of infrastructure past, present, and future visited Manchin yet? Oh, Jam writes in and says, I love the fact that I'm getting the real story on what's actually happening in the infrastructure bills, but God, I hate all the news about this bill, and at the same time, it's really disheartening. So it is disheartening. Like sometimes I feel almost guilty in not being a little more uplifting, even though it's kind of impossible to be uplifting with all the negative stuff happening, right? But it's not, I don't wanna like kid you guys, right? So no, it's not looking good, but there's a reason why it's not looking good, right? There's the power dynamic in the country is way, way, way off. And that's why I keep going back to the issue of labor, right? Like it's the only thing that's worked in this country in the past. Because if workers are organized, if workers are unionized, if workers have that kind of power, well, they can threaten capital, they can threaten the profitability of these corporations. I mean, John Deere workers are doing it right now, and it's honestly incredibly inspiring and awesome to see. So I look to stories like that to uplift me when I'm feeling down, because there's a class consciousness in this country that ceased to exist over the last several decades. And I think that we're starting to wake up to it. And I think that's a positive thing. That's the positivity to look to. Colorado Blue Blazer Regular says, how odd. Manchimp doesn't want to leave his kids a fictitious debt, but happy to leave them a burned out husk of a planet. Yeah, I don't think they genuinely believe the reality of climate change. It's pretty incredible. Anyway, we've got more for you, so let's get back to the show. See you there. Welcome back to TYT. I'm Anna Kasparian, and I'm happy you're here with us. We've got some more super chat comments I wanted to just quickly read before we move on to the rest of the show. Peter Hamby writes in and says, slept in the mansion, donors call him president of corporations. You know, it's funny because Joe Manchin, the person who was elected as president, was asked about the fact that now people really perceive Joe Manchin, the senator, of being the leader of the country. And he just kind of chuckled about it. And he's like, well, you know, his vote's important. Joe Biden's unwillingness to fight for his own agenda is just one of the most pathetic things I've ever seen. It really is. And his platitudes toward Sinema and Manchin have also been incredibly frustrating. Biden gave Manchin's wife a federal job that she wanted. How about you yank that job away? How about you start playing hardball? But here's the thing, you would play hardball if it was in regard to something you genuinely wanted and believed in. And I don't really think that's the case here. All right, well, we gotta move on to the rest of the news. So let's talk about progressives. Now that we know what's being stripped out of the reconciliation bill, now that we know that billionaires will not get taxed, what is the outcome gonna be? What are progressives gonna do? Progressives have unfortunately begun lining up behind the pared back budget reconciliation bill. The same bill that we learned today will not include a billionaire tax on unrealized gains. The same bill that has now completely cut out 2 years of free community college and paid family and medical leave. That's completely gone. We don't even get 4 weeks. We don't even get 4 weeks, gone. But progressives, unfortunately, are lining up in support with a few exceptions. Now, not every progressive is on the record, to be fair. Let's give them time. Maybe by tomorrow we'll have a better understanding of how many progressives in the Progressive Caucus plan on voting no. But we do know that Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has committed to voting no on the Bipartisan Infrastructure Bill. That's the corporate handout bill that was separated out of the budget reconciliation bill as the corporate favorite. That's the one that corporate Democrats desperately want. That's the one that Republicans desperately want, because that's the one that corporations desperately want. That's the bill that privatizes public infrastructure. They love it. Oh wait, we get to take public infrastructure and implement tolls and fees? So Americans who need to commute to work are gonna have to pay just to get to work? Awesome, awesome, they love it. The budget reconciliation bill, which was supposed to be the human infrastructure bill, the bill that was supposed to actually materially improve the lives of workers, that's been pared back to something that's unrecognizable. So again, AOC says, I'm voting no on the bipartisan infrastructure bill. And I think that's the right way to go about it. That is the right strategy. But what about the rest of the Democrats who spoke to the Associated Press? Well, just to remind you all, Manchin forced Democrats to drop language finding utilities that don't move away from heavily polluting fuels and rewarding those that do, which was a pillar of their climate change plan. So that was also cut out of the reconciliation bill. But Mazie Hirono, Democrat, says this: of course I don't like it, she says, of the outside influence moderates have had in compressing the package and erasing some of its provisions. These are all things that we've been fighting for decades. But she said with democratic unity needed, the party should use the bill to open the door to its priorities and then try extending and expanding them later. Just like they did with the Affordable Care Act, guys. Remember how the Affordable Care Act was just meant to be the foundation of healthcare reform? And then Democrats were gonna fight like hell to really build upon that, really expand that, right? Is that what they did? No, they didn't do that at all. In fact, Republicans under the Trump administration succeeded in doing away with the mandate, which was one of the ways to keep premiums low in the Affordable Care Act. I mean, it's a disaster. So not only did they fail in expanding the Affordable Care Act, they also failed in mitigating the damage that's been done by the Republican Party. But let's give you some more statements. Here's Representative Jim McGovern, who says, at the end of the day, we have to accomplish something. We have to deal with the reality in which we're living. So the question is, would we prefer not getting anything, or would we prefer something that can at least be a down payment on some of the transformational programs that we want? All right, let's be clear about something. This bill, the reconciliation bill, is not transformational, with the exception of universal pre-K, assuming that that doesn't get cut. That's the only thing that I've seen so far that has not been pared back. But wait, who knows what the future holds? So as it stands today, it's not really transformational. Do Democrats really want it? He says transformational programs that we want. Do you really want it? Because if you really want it, you'd vote no on the bipartisan infrastructure bill. Because as things stand today, corporatists want that bipartisan infrastructure bill way more than progressives want the reconciliation bill, because the reconciliation bill is unrecognizable at this point. It doesn't include most of the major provisions that they claim they really want, that they claim they've been fighting for. So why would they give corporatists a win? Progressives actually have way more leverage than they realize. The question is, are they gonna use that leverage? And it seems that there are several progressives in the so-called progressive caucus who are unwilling to use that leverage because they're worried about the midterms. So that's the other thing. Corporate Democrats not only desperately want to pass that bipartisan infrastructure bill, they also want to point to something as a victory as they run for their re-election campaigns. So are progressives just gonna give them a reward for the behavior that they've engaged in? I mean, I know I wouldn't. And just to answer Representative McGovern's question, yeah, I think nothing is better than what we're about to get. Because it's not just about what remains in the reconciliation bill, it's about the precedent this sets. It's about communicating to the corporate wing of the Democratic Party that progressives, even when they have tremendous leverage, can be pushed around and they're just gonna shut up and take it. That's a really bad precedent to set. But more importantly, it just does the exact opposite of what progressives were elected into Congress to do. They were supposed to fight back against the corporate wing of the party. And to just like lay down and take it, it's beyond depressing. And then there's this weird game of chicken. Because that whole game where corporatists want to vote on the bipartisan bill before the reconciliation bill, that's still going on, believe it or not. So Pramila Jayapal, the head of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, was asked about that. What is gonna be the order of voting here? Are you willing to vote in favor of the bipartisan infrastructure deal before the bill for the reconciliation, before the reconciliation bill is ready? And her answer was as follows, let's watch.
If we can all get to agreement before the president leaves, that would be great. We can have an agreement in principle and we can finish voting the bills out next week.
And is that enough for you, an agreement in principle to move forward on a vote on the bipartisan package?
Well, we're calling for both votes on both bills at the same time. So hopefully by next week we can get them both done.
By next week, okay.
I mean, hopefully sooner than that. You know, we're ready. We're ready. We've been ready. I mean, we've been ready for some time.
But the progressive caucus in your position still hasn't changed. A framework is not enough to vote on the bipartisan package.
What we've said consistently, and we've been really clear about this, is we want to vote both bills. Now, you know, we're willing to, if there's agreement on the Senate moving forward, and the president has an ironclad commitment from all 50 senators, we will vote both of them out of the House, but we still want to vote both of them out of the House.
I mean, who cares? The reconciliation bill is unrecognizable. It doesn't include many of the provisions that progressives claim they want and have been fighting for. But even with everything pared back, the corporate wing of the party is still trying to play this game where they're just trying to get that bipartisan bill passed immediately and then, yeah, we'll get to the reconciliation bill when we get there. And what's amazing, or maybe not amazing, maybe this is the most expected part of the story, was how Speaker Nancy Pelosi reacted to what Pramila Jayapal said there. Let's watch.
Speaker Pelosi, Congresswoman Jayapal just said that a framework agreement is not enough to vote for the bill.
Well, I think it is. Thank you all.
I think it is. I think it is. Even if we don't have the bill written yet, and all we have for the reconciliation bill is just a framework, which is nothing. I think the framework is enough to ensure that we vote on the bipartisan infrastructure bill. That's what Nancy Pelosi said there. When you do that, you get rid of all your leverage for the reconciliation bill. No, they've given up. The reconciliation bill is like super on the back burner based on the way House leadership just responded to that question. Also, during a closed door meeting of House Democrats on Tuesday morning, Pelosi implored her rank and file members to compromise and embrace an emerging deal on Biden's roughly $2 trillion social spending and climate change package, even though its size and scope was far less than the $3.5 trillion progressives had hoped to achieve. And listen, it's not just about the top line number. It's not just about how much it spends, it's about where the money goes. No paid family leave or medical leave, gone. No free community college, gone. Funding for elder care, pared back. Major provisions pertaining to climate action, gone. Corporate tax increases, gone. No, but what does the bill include? Don't talk about embracing it. Don't try to turn this lemon into lemonade. It's a rotten lemon. Absolutely rotten. But she's encouraging progressives to go along with it. Why? Well, she claims we're on the verge of something major, transformative, historic, and bigger than anything else. That's amazing, because it's not true. Embrace it for what it is. No bill is everything. We cannot miss this opportunity. But what she's really concerned about is the midterm elections. Democrats want to just get this done. Midterms are coming, they gotta go back to fundraising, and they wanna point to something they accomplished for their fundraising purposes and for their campaigning purposes. And so recent polls show both the New Jersey and Virginia gubernatorial races tightening, with Democrat Terry McAuliffe now essentially tied with Republican Glenn Youngkin in Virginia. National Democratic leaders are increasingly worried that a Republican upset in either state would deflate the base, energize the right, and cripple the agenda of Biden, whose approval numbers are already underwater. You know who's crippling Biden's agenda? Corporate Democrats. So how about you deal with them? But again, this is more evidence that progressive lawmakers have a lot more leverage than they even realize. Why give corporate Democrats a reward? I wouldn't do it. Luckily, AOC isn't gonna do it. But I'd like to see more Democrats, especially Justice Democrats, on the record as saying no to the infrastructure bill. The corporatists did not hold up their deal of this whole negotiation. If they're not gonna play along, why should progressives play along? Trust me, they want that bipartisan infrastructure bill because their corporate donors want it. So for progressives to lose in this game of chicken is incredibly depressing. We gotta take a break. The segment went by way too quickly, but when we come back, we're gonna talk about Steve Donziger, who has been politically persecuted for holding Chevron accountable for polluting water and the environment in Ecuador. That story is incredible, you don't wanna miss it. We'll also talk about how Fox News wants you to believe that if you are poor, you're actually really, really rich. Makes no sense, but we'll explain when we come back. What's up, everyone? Welcome to our social break. DJ Bart Kyle on the ones and twos.
Thank you very much.
With that EDM music, with that ice cream remix, I love it. And Edwin Umano over here manning the stage. Edwin, you're the best. All right, well, let's get to some of our super chats. So we have Supremacy 45. It's an interesting handle. We definitely need to organize as the labor class that makes these devils billionaires. If we all called off for one day, they would fold for sure. Love you, Anna. I don't know if one day is enough, to be honest, but the thing that I love about working on that show for Jacobin Weekends, which you should check out, I host it with Nando Vila, is that it gives me an opportunity to really study labor movements, especially the labor movement in the United States. And you look at history books today and they completely clear out any mention of labor unions in passing incredibly amazing things. Like child labor laws, I was watching a video today and they argued that the child labor laws came about because Americans were finally wealthy enough to not need children anymore to work. Like, how ridiculous is that revisionist history? No, it was because of labor strikes that happened for literally decades. Okay, the AFL had passed its resolution regarding child labor in 1880 or 1881. That was the first time that they really started to try doing something about child labor. But it wasn't until 1938 that Roosevelt passed child labor laws. So I tell you all of that because it takes time, it takes a lot of fighting, but that's really the only thing that's worked. So anyway, sorry, I'm talking too much. Let me go to more of these comments. We've got Waldorf Nation. What's up, Waldorf? Anna's hair looks amazing. Also strong opening, thank you. HXC Mike says, so now that they dropped family leave, Manchin and Sinema are fully on board, right? Right? Oh, they never were going to support it anyway. Shock. Yeah, I mean, I haven't seen a commitment from either one of them. Sinema says that she's in favor of the 15% minimum corporate tax hike. I think Manchin's in favor of that as well. We'll see how it plays out. But so far, still no commitment, still no yes vote from either one of them. Progressive Canuck, AKA Maple Syrup Dragon, says, Salty Dragon Wednesday is one of my favorite days of the week. Thank you so much. Izzy Sanchez, Joe Manchin, average Americans aren't entitled to services that they pay into, but the wealthy are entitled on not paying anything and get everything they want. Under neoliberalism, there is a role for government. It's just that government doesn't work for us. It works for corporations and the rich. All right, we got to get back to the show, guys, but I love these comments. Keep them coming in. Keep them coming in. I'll see you in just a few minutes. Welcome back. You're watching The Young Turks with Anna Kasparian. In hour 2, John Idarola, host of The Damage Report, will be joining me, and we'll talk about paid family leave. We'll talk about Joe Rogan's latest comments about how he feels that men don't really need to take leave after they have a child with their wife. Okay, or with their partner, I should say. So we'll get to those stories and more, but I want to, first of all, apologize to all of you guys because I really dropped the ball on this next story. And when I say drop the ball, I should have been covering this a while ago. But I didn't really do my due diligence and research it until recently, and I want to share you the details of the political persecution that Steven Donziger is now dealing with. Steven Donziger, a lawyer who won a major legal battle against Chevron on behalf of 30,000 Ecuadorian farmers and indigenous people, is now being forced to serve time 6 months in a federal prison in New York based on a ridiculous misdemeanor charge that is 100% politically motivated. He was charged and found guilty of criminal contempt of court. But once you look at how all of the proceedings, all of this trial was set up so he fails, you'll understand what I mean when I'm talking about political persecution. And to be sure, Chevron was certainly behind this. Now, Chevron claims that it is not behind this. Chevron is not in any way going after Donziger. That is a lie. Let me give you the details. Chevron and 2 federal judges have persecuted Donziger after he won a landmark pollution case against the oil giant in Ecuadorian courts in 2013 for contaminating an area of rainforest the size of Rhode Island. Chevron refused to pay the $9.5 billion judgment and instead counterattacked in US courts. In fact, Chevron, in an effort to avoid having to pay that order, that $9.5 billion, they decided to remove all of their assets from Ecuador, bring it back to the United States, and then they went after Donziger in what you'll see is the most disgusting, politically motivated attack imaginable. And our courts are involved. So Chevron actually filed a RICO case against Donziger in New York City, and the case was heard by US District Judge Lewis Kaplan. Don't forget that name, Lewis Kaplan. And he determined that the ruling of the Ecuadorian courts could not be enforced here in the United States because it was procured, he claimed, by fraud, bribery, and racketeering activities. So he's accusing the lawyer in this case, Donziger, of engaging in fraud, bribery, and racketeering activities. And as a result of that judgment, Donziger was disbarred in 2018. The decision hinged on the testimony of an Ecuadorian judge, Alberto Guerra, who claimed that Donziger had bribed him during the original trial and that the decision against Chevron had been ghostwritten. Wow, those are some pretty serious allegations. But then you dig in a little deeper and the details are a little different from what the district judge here would have you believe. Now, Guerra was a controversial witness. Chevron had actually prepped him on more than 50 occasions before his testimony, paid him hundreds of thousands of dollars, and arranged for the judge and his family members to move to the United States with a generous monthly stipend that was 20 times the salary he received in Ecuador. I mean, it seems like that's witness tampering to me. Seems like there's some bribery going on there. Seems like maybe Chevron should be investigated for what they did here in bringing forth an Ecuadorian judge, paying him handsomely to go after a lawyer who succeeded in winning a massive trial against Chevron after they had polluted the water and the environment in Ecuador. Now, in 2015, when Guerra testified in an international arbitration proceeding, he admitted, according to The Intercept, he admitted that he had lied and changed his story multiple times. According to Chevron, his inaccuracies apparently didn't change the thrust of his testimony. And guess what? Judge Kaplan didn't think it was a problem at all. He thought that the testimony was totally valid. Given the fact that this judge who served as a witness against Donziger admitted that he had changed his story and that he had lied. Doesn't matter, still credible. Now, I should also note that Judge Kaplan is a judge who was endorsed by the Federalist Society, a right-wing organization, very well funded, very well organized, that has succeeded in getting conservative, pro-corporate judges appointed to various federal courts, okay? So the Federalist, this group, they get some funding, they have donors, and oh wow, what a shocker. One of their major donors happens to be Chevron. Conflicts of interest, I mean, who knows, maybe it's not that important. Except it's incredibly important because as you can see here, all of these connections, all of these corporate interests, all this moneyed interest had a huge impact on the outcome of Donziger's case and the outcome of his entire life. He's gonna serve 6 months in a federal prison in New York for a misdemeanor, which by the way, that in and of itself, even if he was actually guilty of that, serving prison time for that misdemeanor is unprecedented. But let me give you more. Now, after Donziger appealed that ruling, he was charged with criminal contempt. So that was when he was charged with criminal contempt. He's like, wait. So this judge who has conflicts of interest just found me guilty in this RICO case that was brought forward by Chevron. I'm gonna appeal it because it's wrong. And because he appealed it, the court found him guilty of criminal contempt. No, guys, look, I get it. I get that voting for awful Democrats who I can't stand myself is disheartening, it's discouraging, you feel a little dirty when you do it, but judges matter. Getting these Federalist Society judges in our federal courts has lasting negative ramifications, and we're seeing it play out in real time with Donziger. Let me give you more. In July of 2021, this year, District Judge Loretta Preska found him guilty of that misdemeanor charge of criminal contempt and sentenced him to 6 months in prison, okay? And so he appealed that, and he was hoping that he could stay out of prison during the appeal process, but no. Beginning today, he had to report to prison. He gave his son a hug in a post that he put up on Twitter. It was heartbreaking. And he's gonna serve 6 months in prison for this nonsense charge, nonsense, accusation of criminal contempt, which again is a misdemeanor and has really like no merit. There's a clear political, this is clear political persecution. I really have no other way of explaining it. Now, as he was arguing the case against Chevron in Ecuador back in 2009, the company expressly said its long-term strategy was to demonize him. And since then, Chevron has continued its all-out assault on Donziger and what's become one of the most bitter and drawn-out cases in the history of environmental law. Chevron has hired private investigators to track him, created a publication to smear him, and put together a legal team of hundreds of lawyers from 60 firms who have successfully pursued an extraordinary campaign against him. It is insane. And by the way, he's been under house arrest for more than 800 days. So he's already been imprisoned in his own home for more than 800 days. And now he has to serve another 6 months in a federal prison for a misdemeanor charge that is just complete and utter nonsense. Because he had the audacity to want to appeal the ruling in the RICO case. I mean, okay, well now let's get to the criminal contempt of court. What was that about? Why? Like what? So he was found guilty in the RICO case, and it was completely politically motivated. How did he get found guilty of criminal contempt of court? Well, apparently the home confinement is his punishment for refusing a request to hand over his cell phone and computer, something that's been asked of few other attorneys. To Donziger, who had already endured 19 days of depositions and given Chevron large portions of his case file, the request was beyond the pale, and he appealed it on grounds that it would require him to violate his commitments to his clients. Now, Donziger, by the way, complied for the most part, but at some point he's like, I've given you guys so much. What you're asking for now makes my own clients vulnerable. There's attorney-client privilege, as you guys know, right? So he said, I can't give you what you're looking for, but he complied with everything else. Donziger said he turned in over the devices if he lost the appeal. But even though the underlying case was civil, the federal court judge who has presided over the litigation between Chevron and Donziger since 2011, Lewis Kaplan, drafted criminal contempt charges against him. In another legal peculiarity, in July, Kaplan appointed a private law firm to prosecute Donziger after the Southern District of New York declined to do it. A move that is virtually unprecedented. And as Donziger's lawyer has pointed out, the firm Kaplan chose, Seward and Kissel, likely has ties to Chevron. Kaplan has ties to Chevron. He is a judge promoted by the Federalist Society, which is funded by Chevron. Huge conflicts of interest. Obviously, lots of political motivation behind what's happening to Donziger. Kaplan bypassed the standard random assignment process, and he himself handpicked someone he knew well, US District Judge Loretta Preska, to oversee the case being prosecuted by the firm he chose. It was Preska who sentenced Donziger to home detention and ordered the seizure of his passport, even though Donziger had appeared in court on hundreds of previous occasions. So there you have it. When you have well-organized, well-funded conservatives focusing on every single part of our government, taking over every single part of government, we're talking about federal judges. We're talking about lifetime appointments. We're talking about pro-corporate. That's the main point. When I say conservative, I'm not just talking about how they feel about abortion or gay marriage. Those issues are important, but that's not the main thing the Federalist Society is focused on. What they're focused on is ensuring that pro-corporate judges sit in federal courts for the rest of our lifetimes. Look at the makeup of the Supreme Court. That wasn't an accident. That took decades of funding, coordinating, and organizing by the right wing. on behalf of corporate interests. And now a lawyer's entire life has been completely destroyed because he had the courage to fight back against a massive corporation, Chevron, that engaged in drilling in Ecuador that contaminated the drinking water, that polluted the environment there. He won, he fought, he won, and now he's suffering the consequences here in his home country because we have a disgusting, corrupt system in place. Because we have corporate judges that have all sorts of conflicts of interest and they're never held accountable for it. It's absolutely depressing. And there's nothing behind this case against Donziger other than politically motivated actions to punish him and to send a message to other lawyers who might consider holding powerful corporations accountable for their behavior. That's what this story's about. All right, we got to take a break. When I come back, John Iadarola will join me and we'll give you a little taste of why Fox News believes that if you're poor in America, you're actually very, very rich. We'll also get into Joe Rogan's latest statements about leave for fathers who have just had children. Lots of stories to get to. Don't miss it. We'll be right back.
I'm old enough that I remember when Captain Crunch put the berries in it.
Yay, crunch berries!
And I was like, ooh, the fake berries.
Remember?
We're gonna try that.
We did a story back in the day about how a woman sued, I don't know, General Mills.
She'd been eating it for 4 years, believing that it was actual berries. Yeah, she's like, these aren't real berries at all. Yeah. I'm like, I got news for you, Captain Crunch isn't really a captain or a person. Joining me now, legendary whistleblower and American hero, Edward Snowden. First question is, hey, where are you?
I'm in my apartment in Moscow.
All of a sudden, in the studio, Jim Gaffigan, everybody.
Mental illness is, completely undiagnosed in our society.
It's not about a particular administration. It's about a broken system of power, and through that, really, the instrumentalization of a system of not justice, but injustice.
People understand whether they claim to deny climate change or not. Our collective house is in crisis. We're also dealing with the legacy of 40 years of economic policies that have made people's lives more precarious.
Sometimes you got to force people into their humanity. Sometimes you have to shake people into empathy.
Senator Elizabeth Warren joins us in the studio.
Healthcare is a basic human right, and we are fighting for basic human rights.
In order to actually achieve that vision of everyone having access to the same resources and getting to determine the outcome of their life, we have a lot of work to do, and it needs to start right now.
Here's something you may not know. When you deposit your money in a big bank, it doesn't just sit, safe and secure, in a vault. Instead, your money could end up building oil pipelines, mining for coal, or drilling in the Arctic. So if you're concerned about the planet, give your money something good to do. Make the move to green with Aspiration's fossil fuel-free account and join the thousands each week who are switching to save their dollars and save the planet at the same time.
Welcome to the Damage Report. I'm John Iadarola. This is gonna be a big one.
What Donald Trump has done as president has cut taxes for the wealthy and made life better for rich people. But he's made life worse for poor people.
We're making America great again by throwing more money at the military to destroy other countries because that makes us great instead of investing it in ourselves.
That it's Donald Trump and it's Stephen Miller. The choosing is based on wanting to create cruel and inhumane conditions to scare other people away from ever coming to the United States.
The opportunity to make money off of tragedy is the American way.
There's only one place to put garbage people: in the trash.
We've never had so much access to so much information with so little idea of what the hell is going on.
What does enforcing our borders have to do with traumatizing children? Absolutely nothing.
I think a sane person could say the current situation we have right now is radical. But what we're doing is literally making the world more like hell. That's a warning sign.
ShopTYT.com now has books. One of them is Ryan Grimm's book, We've Got People. That's a saying that AOC said, they've got money, we've got people. It's the best tracing of the AOC victory I have seen anywhere. It's the most accurate, and it's got great details. The book actually goes all the way back to Jesse Jackson and how he's the original Bernie Sanders. If you want to know how we're going to win going forward, those lessons are super important, and they're in Ryan's book. So check it out right now at ShopTYT.com.
We found the perfect person to lead the army, Allison Hartson.
The establishment media works hand in glove with our corporate legislators, and our corporate legislators work hand in glove with the corporation. And we're going to make it so that it's a decentralized force throughout the country so that we can quickly identify stories, quickly identify troll farms, and go in and neutralize the enemy, and then start building responsible media throughout the country and on every platform available.
Lieutenant Dan, ice cream.
Ice cream. Yes, bringing you all the funky hits. DJ Bart Kyle on the ones and twos.
Thank you very much.
All right. What's up, everyone? John Idarola, host of The Damage Report, joins us for our dose. And we've got some fun stories. No, we don't have fun stories. I'm going to take that back. But we do have a fun story in the bonus episode where we will have our, of course, our Wednesday ice cream party.
Obviously.
But I don't know. I'm very curious to see how you guys feel about what I'm going to share with you in the bonus episode, because it's what I was finding some solace in last night as I was incredibly frustrated with what's been going on with the budget reconciliation bill. So
interesting. I have no idea what you're talking about.
You'll see.
Okay.
You'll see.
Okay.
So you can become a member, tyt.com/join, or if you're watching us on YouTube, you just click on that join button, and then you are presented with a platter of options, different tiers, if you will. So you can decide which tier you join, and you get all sorts of perks for being a member, including supporting us and getting all sorts of exclusive members only programming. Special thanks to John P., Arian Terry, and Peter Grudge for becoming new YouTube members. We're super appreciative of that. And I am also very appreciative of our Twitch community with all the new bits and subs. I will give you guys some props during our next social break. But for now, a story I've been dying to share with you guys since this morning when I found out about it. So, Fox News had some clown on to tell Americans suffering with severe economic anxiety that they've got nothing to worry about. In fact, if they feel that they're poor, if they're actually broke or living in debt, have no fear, you're actually a lot more wealthy than you know. Let's watch.
We are far more successful than European nations, and I think the writers at the New York Times and elsewhere, they don't realize that, or they try to trick people into believing it's not true.
We're also the kindest, most charitable state. We like to rip on ourselves all the time, but we give more money than many countries' GDP.
Absolutely. An average American gives 7 times as much as the average European. Now, the European will say, hey, we pay a lot in taxes, so that's don't give charity. Well, yeah, that's the problem. When you give charity, you give to your local community, you build bonds with your neighbors and your church and your and local, but you can't do that when government elbows out charity.
And the thing is, it's not just the rich, it's the working class give it the same percentage as the upper class. Big salute to our country.
Big salute to our country. And you know what? Finally, someone is holding that socialist rag, the New York Times, accountable for their socialist reporting.
Yeah.
Right? Like what? The New York Times, the New York Times, they're too friendly to the worker.
Yeah.
Come on. I mean, look, I have a bunch of data to rebut a lot of the garbage that was said there, but John.
Yeah, you're gonna have to get in line because he's rebutting his own stuff. So supposedly they can't give charity in Europe because their taxes are higher. But according to him, we give 7 times as much. But their taxes definitely aren't 7 times as much. So clearly you can manage being charitable and having taxes. And look, the whole thing is so nonsensical. The entire premise of Fox News, whenever a Democrat is in office, is the country's going to hell, everything's falling apart, the economy is terrible, the inflation is so high. No, apparently we're doing quite well around the world. Why don't they apply the argument that one anonymous rando made to every other segment they do literally today?
So the guest that was speaking to Brian Kilmeade is David Harsanyi. I'm not very familiar with him, but I do know that everything he said there was just full of lies, really. And what I question is whether he knows it and he's just intentionally lying to people watching Fox, or if he's really that delusional. But regardless of what his intentions are, let's actually get to the heart of the matter. Number one, the United States being the most charitable, I don't know if they're specifically referring to charitable giving within the country, or if they're talking about us giving, some of our money in the form of foreign aid, but
they hate foreign aid, so it might well be that.
If they're talking about foreign aid, let me just note, how charitable was the United States when it went in and orchestrated a coup in Guatemala as soon as US corporations were concerned about, agriculture being nationalized there and corporations not being able to rape and pillage their land? I don't know, I'm just curious, how charitable was that? I mean, how charitable was the United States when it engaged in the recent coup in Bolivia? I mean, it goes on and on and on.
Look at what we gave Afghanistan and Iraq.
Perfect example, but look, we do give foreign aid. But foreign aid isn't just given to countries in need. We give foreign aid strategically based on our own foreign policy interests. That's it. I'm a realist when it comes to that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But going back to the United States and where we really are as people who are just so privileged to live in such a fruitful country, right? Well, it turns out that between 1995 and 2013, workers' share of national income in the United States dropped by 8 percentage points, a steeper decline that in any other nation except for a steeper decline than in any other country except South Korea and Poland. In fact, if you take a look at this graph, because we're going to compare the United States and the European Union. So the top 1% versus bottom 50% national income shares in the US. We'll get to Europe in the next graph, but if you just take a look at this, you'll see what happened to wealth in this country going back to the 1980s, right? So you see a massive increase in the amount of wealth accumulated by the top 1%, and then the bottom 50%, you see that wealth consistently drop. Now, I'm sure that this trend will be far more pronounced in the European Union, especially because the Fox News guest said that we have a far better system here. So let's take a look at European countries and how that, oh wow, that's interesting. Oh,
different.
A little different, different. You don't see that X, right? You see two parallel lines and okay, well, maybe.
Yeah, it's not that there's been no motion. There is some motion, but it is not an X.
In fact, you see that the bottom 50%, I mean, you see a little bit of an increase for the top 1% in Western Europe. But overall, there's some consistency there that would be kind of nice.
Yes.
Okay, so with that said, let's look at poverty rates in OECD countries as of 2019. This was the latest data that was released by the OECD, February of this year to be exact. And here's what they found. In terms of the countries with the highest poverty, you're looking at the top 5. Costa Rica comes in at number 1 with 19.9% of its population living in poverty. Hungary is next with 17.9%. And then, oh wow, would you look at that? The United States comes in at 3rd place with 17.8% of the US population living in poverty. Wonderful. But when we compare it to European countries, what's the difference? So let's take a look at Sweden, just 8.9%. France, 8.5%, Norway 8.4%, Netherlands 8.3%, Belgium 8.2%. Again, just a reminder, friendly reminder, United States 17.9% of individuals living in poverty. What about jobs? Let's get to jobs. Decade-old OECD research found that an unusually large amount of job turnover in the United States is due to firing and layoffs. Our country is so great. There's always all this innovation and job creation. No one ever gets laid off, right? And Labor Department figures show the rate of layoffs and firings actually hasn't changed significantly since the research was conducted. Not only do Americans get fired more than other workers, we also get less warning. Every developed nation beside the United States and Mexico requires companies to give individual workers at least a week's notice before laying them off. I don't know, Europe seems pretty sweet. So I'll get to some more data in just a second. John.
Yeah, look, even the week seems insulting, but we don't do that. Generally, you're fired on the spot. And why? Why do we do that? Because you can't be trusted. If we were to fire you, you would obviously not work. You have no commitment to your work. You're just faking it for the money, you damn poor you. And you'd probably steal stuff or break stuff. You'd sabotage stuff. You are not a trustworthy human. That's why we need to boot you out and escort you out of the building. It's a small thing, but it's totally true. Yeah, look, the whole argument is absolutely insane. It makes sense for them to make it. They have the senior writer of the National Review talking to a millionaire about how Americans have it too good and everything's too good. Simultaneously, America's not great and needs to be made great again. And conservative Americans are totally right to be filled with economic anxiety, but also stop it. Come on, everything is so good. Why are you complaining? That's not actually, what they say when they're running for office. But at a critical juncture where maybe a bill might have something that would help out working class Americans, suddenly everybody has it too good. It is like the number one or number two thing at Fox that needs to be fought against. You can weigh it before or after, white supremacy and replacement theory and all that, is trying to convince an increasingly large percentage of the country to never, ever, ever think about money.
Right.
Your condition should never improve. It's honestly, you're getting a bit ahead of yourself to even think that it should someday. It should never improve for you. It should definitely improve for billionaires and millionaires. They are, after all, better than us. But the thing is, it's ridiculous when you say it like that, but it actually works. They get people worked up over some book in a school library, and for 6 months, no one in their audience thinks, hey, wait, why are my wages going down? Right. Why can't I find a job? I'm gonna get kicked out of my house and I can't afford health insurance. Shut up, think about Mr. Potato Head's penis. Just think about some culture war nonsense, and it 100% works.
Yeah, distraction, 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 distraction. All I'm asking, because I do know that we have some on the right who like to hate watch us, and welcome, I'm happy you're here. Just consider the similarities that you share with your friends on the left, right? And I'm not talking about social issues, cultural issues. I get that there's a lot of disagreement there. But in terms of your material conditions, in terms of what you're experiencing with the precarity of your work, right? And the way that you're treated at work. A lot of similarities there, a lot of room for improvement if we fight together. With that said, for our European audience, if you are already insulted by what this guy had to say, don't worry, he's got more for you. Let's watch.
It seems increasingly that progressives are taking over the Democratic Party, and this is the state that they envision. They envision Denmark, they envision France. The problem is it's even worse in a way because they don't actually want people to pay for it. They just want, either to create more debt or have just rich people pay for it, which is not how it works in Europe at all.
You talk about the European culture as a culture of victimhood, and they say that meritocracy doesn't exist. Why are the two axioms important to tell the American story?
Well, because we excel at almost in every quantifiable way possible. We excel economically over Europeans. It's not because we're smarter or born better. It's because we have a system that is about risk, that embraces risk taking, that is entrepreneurial, that rewards people for the things that they invent and do with money or with riches and fame and all those things. In Europe, it's a much more docile and pliable population, and they embrace safety over risk most often, and we don't do that here.
You think Europeans are docile?
Yeah.
Scandinavian countries don't have federal minimum wages because they have labor power. Labor unions negotiate on behalf of workers and secure some pretty sweet wages for those workers. Also, I just want to show you how docile the French are. Let me remind you about the yellow vest movement. And this was when Emmanuel Macron wanted to implement regressive taxes that hurt workers. This is how docile they were in response. Let's watch. By the way, that was the 27th week of the protests, the Yellow Vest movement. And I share that because the protesters were met with tremendous violence from law enforcement. You can see those videos all over the internet, water cannons. I mean, you had cops just raining terror on them, but they kept showing up until they got Macron to agree to repeal the taxes that he had proposed that would, again, hurt workers in the country. So if anything, we've been far too docile here in the United States, where labor power has certainly waned it's been the case for many, many decades. And it wasn't until fairly recently that people started like really rising up and organizing their workplace. You had the Black Lives Matter movement, which yes, had to do with police violence, but there was also a socioeconomic component to that as well. And so I wanna see more of that. I mean, they're gonna call you rioters or looters or whatever, but no, if you think the French are docile, no, we're docile.
Yeah.
It wasn't until recently that we finally started speaking up and demanding more.
Yeah. You said you hope that some conservatives are watching. I hope some conservatives are watching. I know you hate me, I'm a commie or whatever, but I care about not only your life in our commentary on COVID in a way that nobody on Fox literally ever has. They cannot try to convince you any harder than they have that they don't care if you live or die. But also, I care about the economic situation of you and your family. And under the system that Fox News supports, and by the way, far too much of CNN, MSNBC, and the Democratic Party as well supports, things will never ever improve for you. Things might improve in the US. We'll see more like an advanced version of the chart that Anna showed. You'll see that X diverging even more, but it isn't because we value risk over safety or whatever. It's because we have bludgeoned our workers into submission, and we don't expect any more than we have. And even when we fight for it, they've bought off our politicians so we can't get it. Safety over risk. When was the last time you saw a rich person go broke? It's like virtually impossible in America. You could go bankrupt multiple times and you'd be perfectly fine. We have safety and we have risk, very much depending on who you are. You can end up on the streets if you have like a $500 unexpected expense, but wealthy people are gonna be perfectly fine. Their businesses can go under, they'll get bailed out. You've seen it happen in the past. It's just that there's safety for a certain class of American and not for another. And you get to choose whether you get disarmed, whether you believe that critical race theory is literally the most important thing. You should spend the rest of your life fighting against that as you go deeper and deeper into debt, as retirement becomes more and more inconceivable. We do have a different path. They've tried to convince you that it's a scary one. Take a look around you right now. The present is pretty scary too.
Absolutely. All right, we got to take a break. When we come back, tough guy Rogan tells you that if you're a new father, you don't need to spend time with your infant. We'll be right back. What's up, everyone? Wanted to show love to our Twitch audience. Akpuft Dragon cheered 1,000 bits. Thank you so much. Scream in Cheese resubbed with Prime with the comment, Anna 2024, Anna 2024, Anna 2024. Is that for Congress, presidency?
Whatever.
Yeah. Oh, how fun would it be to make so many enemies in Congress?
You would be so depressed having to talk to these people, though.
No, I'd love it. I have a decade and a half of rage that I like try to alleviate on the show by doing the show. But no, anyway. Anyway, okay, CDub3000 resubbed with Prime. Hey, love the show. My dad is a Q-nut who says TYT is moving to gain power over the nation. I told him, yeah, for the people, let's show them the future, guys. Yeah, I'm not really one of those people who's like, ooh, power for power's sake. Actually, it sounds pretty awful. But I do like the idea of empowering people who actually want to fight. Organize your workplace. Okay, Lynn resubscribed with Prime. 8 months on the greedy space cowboy. Love the show all day long. Start my day with TDR and end my day with old school. Thank you all for what you do. For those of us that actually care.
Can I do a plug really fast?
Yes.
Did you mention that?
Yes.
So thank you everybody for watching. Some of you are watching on the Young Turks YouTube channel, and maybe sometimes you watch the Damage Report on that same channel. Well, starting on November 1st, that's not gonna happen anymore. You can still watch the show at youtube.com/The Damage Report and at Twitch and the members app and all of that. But on the Young Turks YouTube channel, they will no longer be streaming the full show of the Damage Report. So in advance of that, so you're not surprised, you should go to youtube.com/The Damage Report right now. You can subscribe, ring the bell to get notifications, and you'll be ready for the transition, which is coming up in just a few days.
Well, Warhammer Dragon 86 says, hey Anna and Johnny Pie, loving the show. Just wanted to bring up a controversial topic in woodwork. Left hand versus right hand circular saws. What's your take? Cheers.
I have right hand privilege. I've actually been using my circular saw recently. I've never even thought about that. Yeah, I guess some tools could be much more awkward if you were left-handed.
Yeah, I also have not thought much about that.
Sorry.
And it's definitely right-hand privilege.
We're privileged.
But also, I am not that privileged because I have not had any time to do any woodworking projects. And I'm kind of salty about that.
I gotta show you the workbench and all the shelves I've made. I made this whole big thing.
John's building houses. Like John's building houses and I'm losing my skills. Like I had a dream once that I would be able to do the dovetail joints.
Oh geez, well I haven't done that, but.
There's gadgets and gizmos that you can use. Yeah, but anyway, I love woodworking and like.
I've been doing pocket hole joinery. That's the most advanced thing I've learned. It's not that complicated.
We gotta talk about it.
It's fun.
All right, and then I wanted to read a few member comments. Kate Nix says, want to win midterms, tell Sinema and Manchin to go F themselves and pass the original bill, meaning the original reconciliation bill. I agree, but we're really seeing progressives folding, unfortunately, on this.
Yep.
All right, we gotta get back to the show. See you there. Welcome back to TYT, Anna and John with you. Special thanks to our super chat commenters. Wanted to give them some love and read a few of their comments, starting with Max Idol, who wrote in and said, if you're in a union, strike. If you are not in one, organize one. If you are unable to do either, don't buy products from companies that are on strike. I think that's really great advice. Also, look up ways to help support the striking John Deere workers. People have been sending them resources. The United Auto Workers, which is the union representing them, luckily does have a pretty robust strike fund. So they're able to pay for the COBRA premium since they got kicked off of their employer's health insurance while they're striking. See if you can donate money to them or send them pizzas. Any little bit helps. Show some solidarity and love to your fellow workers. R. Stone also says, since corporations fought so hard to not protect the planet, how about put forward legislation to stick all damages from natural disasters to them? They definitely have the money to cover it. Well, you know how I feel about that. I definitely agree, but we can't even get 4 weeks of paid family leave. So we're not gonna get anything we want really until we change the power dynamic in this country. And again, I keep repeating it on the show today. I really think the only way to do it at this point is to build labor power and threaten capital. So, all right, let's move on to Rogan. I've been doing a good job teasing this story throughout the show, so now I'm gonna fulfill the tease. All right, so Joe Rogan has weighed in on the transportation secretary's paternity leave. Yes, Pete Buttigieg and his partner have a new child. And so he has decided to take leave, but Rogan thinks that's unnecessary because Rogan knows better than anyone else how Buttigieg should parent. So let's watch.
Listen, man, I understand it's hard to raise a child, but isn't that supposed to be for the person who gave birth?
It's crazy. Yeah,
Do men
you're
take
right.
paternity leave? But here's the thing. One of you should do that. One of you should take care of the children. Like this idea that both parents should get maternity and paternity leave at the same time is a little weird.
I don't think it's weird at all. When you have a new baby, whether you've given birth to that baby or not, it is an overwhelming experience. And I don't know, I kind of fall on the side of the boss isn't as important as your family is. Like really think about the core of that argument, right?
Yeah.
The core of the argument is you being by your boss's side and making profit for your boss is more important than being there in the first few weeks of your baby's life. I'd rather be with the baby. Whether I push that baby out of my vagina or not, I'd rather be with the baby. How about that?
I think that those weeks you could be spending with your boss are an important bonding time. I think that you'll grow closer to your boss. I think that that's important. So someday they're gonna be there, when you're walking down the aisle. No, the whole thing is ridiculous. And I'm glad that you focused on that. This morning on the pre-show, that's what I was talking about. Like this is what we were talking about with Fox before. This is a crossover between Rogan and Fox, and not just that, like, is his show just like 2 week later reruns of Tucker Carlson? Like Tucker Carlson was making these same points against Pete Buttigieg literally weeks ago. I thought Joe Rogan was doing like totally independent stuff. He has the exact same positions as Tucker Carlson. But yeah, it's a wonderful confluence of the disarming your audience from ever considering their economic situation or believing that things can get better, combined with the brittle masculinity that guys like Joe Rogan love to push. The idea that masculinity is always being very scared of somebody thinking you're doing something weird. Why are you doing that thing? You don't want to do that thing. Someone might question you. Why are you trying to bond with a kid? That's mom stuff. You shouldn't be worried about that. Since when has that become the idea of what fatherhood is? Aren't you supposed to be around to help guide your son or your daughter into being a upstanding? It's just such nonsense.
Only when you want to comment on black fathers.
Sure,
That's the only time.
Which isn't a point that he's making right here, but you're totally right about Fox.
But okay, so but just take a step back. I don't know what Rogan has said about black fathers, but conservatives generally speaking.
Sure, that was O'Reilly for years.
Love to comment on where are the black fathers?
Yeah.
Where are the black fathers?
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe we have an unjust justice system that disproportionately targets and imprisons black fathers. That's a huge part of it that they love to leave out of the equation. But I just love how they use these talking points whenever it's convenient for them. But when it comes to having a system in place that is far more friendly to families, so both mothers and fathers can spend a few months with their newborn without worrying about losing their job or their livelihood. No, we can't have it.
No.
We just can't have it. But
it's a coincidence,
your boss is way more important.
It's just a coincidence that the talking points tend to help corporations. It just happens to work out that way. And they're getting you to opt out. You should be ashamed of believing that your working conditions should improve. You should not fight for this. It's not a choice thing, by the way. It's not, well, some men want to do it and others don't. It's wrong of you to believe that you should spend that time with your family. And so weird that they're talking points. And by the way, I saw someone on the supposed left also attacking Pete Buttigieg. Maybe they just really don't like Pete Buttigieg, so all thoughts of ideological consistency fly out of their head. But when you say it's wrong to take maternity or paternity leave, that you should not spend 1 second not under the thumb of your employer, that is obviously a pro-corporate talking point. That's what you're seeing here.
100%, absolutely. And look, it's not just Rogan. There have been others, like the Steven Crowders and other right-wingers who have been attacking Pete Buttigieg specifically for taking paid paternity leave. And I don't think it's shocking that that he's gay and that all of this ire is directed toward him for doing this. But they have a new child, and that is an overwhelming thing to go through. And by the way, if we're talking about heterosexual couples, right? The experience of giving birth is incredibly hard, incredibly overwhelming for the mother. We know that, okay? You have a C-section, they're literally cutting your abdomen open and removing the baby.
And get back to work on Monday.
Breastfeeding is incredibly difficult and painful. You gotta get up every 3 hours to feed the baby. And so, I don't know, maybe having that support, having that partner is incredibly important, right? So you can maybe switch with the 3-hour feeding schedule. So maybe if you're in tremendous pain as the woman who's just given birth, the father or even the mother, right? If we're talking about a lesbian couple, can step in and help you out. I don't know why this is even a controversial issue. It's not a controversial issue for the vast majority of countries.
Yeah.
So the most generous countries for paid leave for fathers are Japan, South Korea, and Portugal, according to the 2019 UNICEF report. The least is the United States, of course. The only country analyzed not to offer any kind of paid leave to mothers or fathers. And let's take a look at this list of paid leave for fathers around the world. In Japan, 52 weeks of paid leave.
Wow.
South Korea, 53 weeks. Spain, 12 weeks. Sweden, 14 weeks. Iceland, 13 weeks. Canada, 5 to 8 weeks. Mexico, even Mexico's got a week. Australia, 2 weeks. United Kingdom, 2 weeks. United States, 0. But we're the best. We're the best because we force the family to stay at work even after they've had a new baby. Okay, great.
That's a bunch of, that's betas. That's all beta stuff. A true man abandons his family when they need him most and bows down to his employer. That is what a true alpha male does.
One more clip from Rogan. I have no idea what he's gonna say in this next one, so let's watch.
Who do you believe should pay for something like that?
I don't know, but if I was an employer and I had a guy who worked for me, who wanted to take 3 months off because his wife gave birth, I'd be like, what are you talking about, Mike?
Even to support his wife?
Give birth? To support his wife while I pay him for free. Do you understand that this is kind of, most people, when this happens, if they make enough money, the wife will not work and the father will work.
Right.
And then the wife takes care of the child. And this is normal.
Yeah.
And then the dad provides support when he comes home. If you're saying that the man and the woman should both get like 3 months off, this is a new thing.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, it's not new in Europe, but
we're not in Europe. This is better. This is America.
He said men take paternity leave?
There are 2 classes in America. There's the capitalist class, there's the worker class. Rogan, I mean, he's talking about it in his context. He doesn't want to have to pay a worker to spend time with his family. That's it. Again, incentives, disincentives. For him, it's about his bottom line. That's all it is. It's not.
Well, he was honest.
Yeah, I mean,
he was honest.
Great.
I mean, how many employees?
That's how the system works, to be fair.
I honestly don't know how many employees he has. I'm going to guess that it is small enough that whichever employee he's referencing there, he's probably known for a while. But don't let that make you believe, dear employee, that you're a human to him. No, you're a cog in the machine. How dare you ask to be paid if I take you out for a few months and put a different cog in there temporarily? This is a guy, like, what was his Spotify deal? Like $100 million? It
was a lot.
Just to switch over. That's not his pay. That was a bonus for switching over. He just is gonna keep doing the same show he was ever doing. He just talks, he smokes weed, he talks. He got $100 million, but you want like free unearned money? You want more than you deserve to be paid? Why are working class people listening to more rich a-holes tell them that they should never have a better life? Our world is full of these people. You listen to him, you listen to Elon Musk. Stop listening to rich a-holes who don't care about you. It's simple. It's simple. You wouldn't do, like if it was Leon Cooperman, you wouldn't take economic policy advice from him. You'd look at him and you'd think, wait, I think he's pursuing his own economic interests. But for some reason, like if Leon Cooperman shaved his head and like rolled a joint, would you suddenly think, this is compelling advice? I should base my future on this.
It depends though. Is he gonna talk about jiu-jitsu?
That might be cool. I don't know. I do actually like jiu-jitsu quite a bit. But anyway, it's just like, yeah, if you think it's entertaining or whatever, do not base your politics on what a rich guy who has nothing financially in common with you says should be the case.
All right, we're gonna take a break. When we come back, Texas is banning books. I'm not even kidding. We've got that story and more for you when we return. Dragon writes in the super chats and says, paternity leave would have been helpful when my second adopted daughter was born. I would not have had to fly back and forth between my home state and my daughter's birth state because I had no more vacation time to use. Look, everyone's got a different situation to deal with, right? So this assumption that, well, the person who didn't give birth doesn't really need to take any time off. It's to be with your family, to be part of the support system for a new baby, for a new child. It literally takes a village. Like, it takes a lot of people. There's no support in this country to have kids. Like, I'm not exaggerating. I think about this all the time. I don't know how parents do it. I don't know how they do it. I think about it all the time. Like, you think that I don't there's a part of me that really wants to have kids.
Yeah.
How the hell am I gonna do it?
Well, we have leave, thankfully, here.
But it's not just about that. It's not just about the leave. Every part of that child's life is a massive obstacle because of how this system is set up. Education, childcare, right? Eventually, when and by the way, TYT is super generous with paid leave. We get 3 months of paid leave, all right? So love that. I love the fact that TYT does that. But when the 3 weeks are up, what do I do? Where do I park the kid?
Just get a dog that's good at watching something and make sure it doesn't wander in traffic.
We need to build a nursery at TYT.
We should work on that. I'm sure there's some employees right now that appreciate that. Look, okay, so we don't provide any support, that's true, but at the very least, we don't force you to have a kid in America, depending on the state.
Dude, such a good point. All right, George Mead wrote in and said, most middle class wealth is held in their homes, which are taxed every year, but it is unfair to tax wealth held in stocks, BS. Excellent point. Excellent point. God, I wish I made that point. It's Matt Gates on a white Ford Bronco writes in and says, I'm a healthcare worker and my student loans are near $200,000. Forgiving $50,000 was a dream for us that battled COVID-19. That dream will never come. Oh God, it's so frustrating. Jonatron, thank you for writing in. Jonatron writes in and says, if progressives get nothing in this budget reconciliation, could we ask that a graph be printed on everyone's paycheck to show that their taxes are going toward or what their taxes are going toward? And Ted Cruz, Wedgie Dragon writes in, working out in the middle of nowhere, South Dakota, but can still listen live. Love you guys. Thank you. Was it South Dakota or North Dakota that was like paying people to move there a few years ago? It was South Dakota?
Wonder if it worked.
How's South Dakota? How's it like? I'm curious.
Yeah, it seems open based on the photos I've seen. I don't know.
Dude, I gotta say, when I was in Pennsylvania for the debate with Ben Shapiro, I really liked that open space.
Yeah?
Yeah, like open fields. Like I wanted to run through it. Like it just looked so freeing. Anyway.
The sound of music.
And hello, somebody says, notice that the Fox talking point started that our average wages are higher than European countries instead of our median wage. Good point. Gotta get back to the show.
That's true.
Wanted to say thank you to our member, Atomic Ann, who's a homie. Love Atomic Ann. She writes in and says, that was an in-depth Chevron story. Such good reporting on TYT. This is why I've been a member for 20 years. I'm really happy that we did that story today. So I'm glad you enjoyed it as well. All right, well, let's get to our next story because while conservatives think that cancel culture is a huge problem in America, it's interesting that when they engage in it themselves, they have no self-awareness whatsoever. Texas lawmakers are now investigating books in school libraries to essentially ban anything that they think would make children uncomfortable. In reality, it's anything that would make them uncomfortable. And yes, we do have a list of the books that they're trying to ban from these school libraries. Again, ban from the school libraries. They're banning books, okay? The cancel culture obsessed group of conservatives in this country are going out of their way to ban very specific books that don't do anything wrong, just happen to, inform students about things that make them uncomfortable. So let me give you the details. So here's a copy of the letter obtained by the Texas Tribune citing our South Lake reporting. It tells districts to disclose the existence of any books that might make students feel discomfort, guilt, anguish, or any other form of psychological distress because of their race or sex. Which is fascinating because it seems like conservatives in Texas are trying to turn public schools into safe spaces, right? Well, let me give you more. The letter provides a 16-page list of about 850 book titles and asks the districts if they have these books, how many copies they have, and how much money they spent on the books. And so why these books specifically? Many of them deal with abortion, teen pregnancy, sex education, or life experience of young LGBT people. Others deal with Black Lives Matter or concepts of anti-racism. So let me give you specific titles, okay? Because it'll blow your mind. The Confessions of Nat Turner, a 1967 novel by William Styron, written as a first-person narrative of an 1831 slave revolt in Virginia. Why can't they read that book? What's wrong with that book? Let me give you more. The Cider House Rules, John Irving's 1985 novel about a protagonist whose childhood mentor is an obstetrician who performs abortions. Here's another one, V for Vendetta. The 1982 graphic novel by Alan Moore about a dystopian post-apocalyptic England ruled by a fascist regime, which became a hit movie in 2005. Let me give you one more. They're also banning The Handmaid's Tale, another dystopian novel written by Margaret Atwood about a post-revolution United States in which women are subjected by a ruling class of men. Krauss, that's the lawmaker in Texas who's going through with all of these bans, specifically asks about a graphic novel form of the book. So remember when Dave Rubin wrote a book, an awful book that got awful reviews titled "Don't Burn This Book"? He titled it that way because he was trying to make a point about how the right wing is really persecuted in this country. That these wide-eyed, overzealous leftists are going out of their way to censor the right wing. But in reality, no one cares about Dave Rubin's book, no one cares to burn it, no one cares to read it because it's so bad. But the right wing, as always, loves to project because that's what they want to engage in. And in Texas, to be clear, that is what they're engaging in.
I am, as a lover of books, I'm very, very angry about this. I have a follow-up question. Are any, and I mean any, of the books of one Dr. Seuss on the list?
Oh, you know what? I need to do some in-depth research on that, but I would not be surprised.
Because if they are, then I'm mad. If they're not, then I don't care anymore. Those are the only books that I care whether they get published or not, even though I'll never read them in my life. I'm a conservative, everybody. Yeah, it's insane. As you said, it is trying to create a safe space and doing cancel culture to create it. And that tells you all you need to know about both of those concepts. They are just political. It's just a narrative to get you to be okay with certain things and not others. None of it actually exists.
I'm really excited to hear Joe Rogan's take on this because he is someone who's very concerned with cancel culture.
Or Dave Rubin's.
Or yeah, I mean, I'm sure they're up in arms about this. I mean, this is literally banning books within school libraries just because the books happen to hurt the right wing's feelings. That's it. That's all this is.
Yeah, the only thing I don't really mind is that they're gonna ban Handmaid's Tale. I don't like spoilers, and I think they want women in America to be surprised at where this goes. They don't want it to be ruined ahead of time. Look, like they're banning V for Vendetta. It's about this sort of government being made. It's so on the nose.
It's so on the nose. It's incredible.
No, this, and again, this all ties back to what we were talking about. They are not banning these. Krause is not trying to ban V for Vendetta because he stays awake at night just so worried that some kid's gonna read this book. He proposes banning the book to get a bunch of right-wing parents fired up over banning the book, because a right-wing parent who spends all their time going to school board meetings about Handmaid's Tale is not wondering why they're underwater on their mortgage and wondering how their kids are ever gonna go to college. That's all it is. It's all about disarming workers, and this is one way that they do it consistently.
Exactly right. All right, well, let's move on to our next story, because Lauren Windsor and the undercurrent strikes again. John Eastman, the insane lawyer who helped convince Donald Trump that he could reverse his election defeat, appears to be next in line for a subpoena from the House Select Committee investigating the January 6th Capitol riots. Now, even before he was subpoenaed, even before he could incriminate himself in a deposition or in any type of testimony, Lauren Windsor, the founder of The Undercurrent, someone who goes undercover as a conservative to get some pretty juicy tidbits out of these right-wingers, struck again. Okay, so she beat the House Select Committee to the punch and spoke to Eastman. And I think what he had to say here could be useful to the investigation. Let's watch.
Supporter to supporter, like why do you think that Mike Pence didn't do it?
Well, because Mike Pence is an establishment guy at the end of the day. The establishment Republicans in DC bought into this very myopic view that Trump was destroying the Republican Party. And what Trump was doing is destroying the inside the Beltway Republican Party and reviving the Republican Party in the hinterland, right? What they all consider to be, deplorable flyover country. And this uprising that Trump got ahead of, he didn't create the movement. The movement was there, and he saw it and got ahead of it.
So in it, he, kind of confesses to his role in this memo, right? Eastman is to be investigated for this memo that planned to have Mike Pence overturn the elections. So here's what we know about the memo. The House Select Committee investigating the US Capitol insurrection plans to subpoena Eastman. The subpoena would be avoidable if Eastman voluntarily chose to cooperate with the committee's inquiry. I wouldn't be surprised if he refused to do that. Now, Representative Jamie Raskin said that the committee needs to determine to what extent there was an organized effort against former Vice President Mike Pence. And we believe that, some of the actors' names have become known, including John Eastman, who laid it out in a memo. So here's what the memo contained. So Eastman had apparently outlined in a 2-page memo a scheme to try to persuade Pence to subvert the Constitution. Under this scheme, Pence would have declared Trump the winner with more electoral college votes after the results from 7 states were thrown out at 232 votes to 222. Anticipating howls from Democrats, the memo proposes Pence would instead say that no candidate had reached 270 votes in the Electoral College. That would throw an election to the House of Representatives, where each state would get 1 vote. Since Republicans controlled 26 state delegations, a majority could vote for Trump to win the election. So that's the memo.
Yeah.
They're scheming. It didn't work, but they're scheming.
Yeah. I liked it better when it was on that that postcard. I thought that was a quaint way to talk about overthrowing the US government. Just put on a little card or whatever with 7 points, but each one has 3 points. It's not really a 7-point plan. Yeah, no, the entire thing is ridiculous. John Eastman does not believe that if the Democrats had the vice president spot and if they controlled 26 state delegations, does he believe thus it is constitutional for the Democrats to win every presidential election? Does he believe that? Does he believe that Kamala Harris, as Jenks says this a lot, so Kamala Harris could do this then? That's what you believe? She can just throw out whatever states she wants, and then if it happens that the Democrats control 26 states, then they win. Do you believe that? No, you don't believe that. Then you're not articulating a legal philosophy. You're not articulating a philosophy. You believe it's convenient. It's insane. Pence doesn't have the authority to do any of the things that he said there. And what Eastman is providing is a marginally more rational version of the things that Trump was screaming on January 6th. Before they went to the White House, when he sent them there, him saying Pence can do it. That's all this is. And we know what nearly happened. We know a lot of the people in that crowd were not fans of Mike Pence. They were convinced, as much as you're convinced of any political belief that you have, that Pence can do this and is choosing not to. And so what do you think they were willing to do to this guy? Yeah, at that point, Pence is stealing the election from Trump. Because Pence can do it even though he can't. It's legal even though it's not. Has nothing to do with the Constitution, but they believe that it does. And so he can do it, but he's choosing not to. Why? Why is he working with Joe Biden? That's what they actually believed.
It's madness. So the investigation is ongoing. I have very little hope for it. I don't know what's the outcome gonna be? I'm glad they're doing the investigation, I guess, but I just want to understand what their objective really is.
Yeah, look, this segment of all of that, and this is a story that obviously has a billion components, is the most obviously hypocritical and simply power focused. It has nothing to do with anything except, wait, if we do this and this and this, then we win? Okay, let's do that. That's all it is. But in terms of illegality, it's not the top 10. Like John Eastman's not gonna get arrested for writing a memo.
Right.
Trump sending a mob after his vice president, you might get in some trouble there.
No,
but simply believing, no, I'm not. I'm saying in theory you could, you will not. But no, in comparison to all the actual crimes that have happened, this doesn't necessarily rank up there. But it is another indication of the complete turn away from any consistency, let alone any respect for democracy on the Republican side. Whatever is true is whatever will result in us gaining office. That's it. And if it's the exact opposite of what it was last time, that's fine. We had that demonstration with Mitch McConnell about the rules for getting a Supreme Court judge in the last year. What do you know? Those flipped on their head. When it stops the Dems, when it gets them a seat, it's whatever it needs to be. That's all politics is for the Republicans now.
So the only other comment I have about this is the attempt to overturn the election, January 6th, everything that occurred that day, it failed, clearly it failed. But I do think it's important to understand what type of organizing took place, right? Because I think that there's this tendency for some on the left to kind of dismiss what happened that day as like really not that much of a big deal, not really a big threat, right? But this is their first attempt at it. And if I know one thing about the right wing, I know that they don't give up and they keep going and they're persistent until they actually accomplish what they want to accomplish. So I really see what happened on January 6th as the beginning of something that could become a pretty dark part of this country, right? Because it's an unlevel playing field. I love Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders lost. Like I wouldn't throw away our democracy just to get Bernie Sanders in, right? I do value our Constitution. I do value the rule of law. I value our democracy. But we're talking about the right wing. They don't value any of that.
No.
As long as they get their guy in office, they're willing to throw everything away.
Yep.
And they're the ones who have branded themselves as the patriots, the ones who love the country. They don't love this country. Loving this country means believing in the democratic process. They don't care about it, they don't believe in it, and they have convinced themselves that even despite all of the recounts that took place in Georgia, in Arizona, in all these states where Trump lost, those recounts don't matter. They still really believe that the election was stolen from Trump. It's insane. And it's scary considering how many of them have just openly said that they will use violence. They want to use violence to get what they want.
Yeah.
It's a dangerous time. And so this investigation could be important as long as it's not just being done for political purposes and it's really meant to respond and react in the future in a way that's gonna keep us safe. All right, post game's next. See you there.
I'll predict right here for you, Chris. I think Donald Trump will leave office before his term is up. He'll be humiliated, embarrassed, and I know him. He's not going to want to lose, and he's going to run for the hills.
You got that bet all day long.
Okay, let's get after it. Now, so look, Jake has made some good predictions, and this isn't good fun. I could not disagree more.
There's no bromance between the two of them. You got that bet all day long, Janky, you. Oh, you stop. In the meantime, let's call him out on the damage.
But
I just got a Roku set. Did basically a little bit of channel surfing, and I was like, there we are.
Yeah.
There we are. And then I turned it on, and it was John and Brett on Damage Report making fun of me.
Oh no.
So you are so